You're in the Temple of Rants, where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by becoming one of those. This one is for Darren Antos, who says, rant about why you like Matthewmatosis over Joseph Anderson. Personally, I like both, but I tend to agree with Joseph about games more. There's a lot of different factors that go into this. Part of it is just that Joseph Anderson does bore me. I find his voice and his cadence boring. His videos feel overlong as compared to Matthewmatosis's. And, Matthewmatosis was one of the first guys doing exceptionally long game reviews. I've been watching him since pretty much he started. And initially, I think that I did think his videos were a little bit too long, but they're just much more tightly written, and over time he's gotten tighter and tighter with his writing, where I don't feel like there's any unnecessary sentences. I don't feel as though he's going in circles in a way that Joseph Anderson still sometimes feels like. I don't feel like his videos need to be as long as they are. Not that he's nearly as bad as, say, like H-Bomber Guy, whose videos could be about a fifth the length they are every single time. But, that's just one element of it. So already on that level, it's like you have to really make a great point for me to care. Now, the next thing is that Joseph Anderson kind of just talks about whatever games, like whatever games he plays, or seemingly whatever comes out. He just covers a lot of games. Matthewmatosis only covers games that are in some way very interesting. He doesn't talk about games that aren't interesting, he's never just like giving you an opinion about a game. He's talking about it because there's an angle. Either it's that this game does something very unique, or that it's very influential and important. So he might tackle he's done a lot of big series where he'll do like all of the 3D Mario games, all of the 3D Zelda games, all the Metal Gear Solid games. These are really important franchises that everyone cares about, that have a lot of nuance to them. A lot of things change between the games, which makes them interesting to compare to one another. And then, when he does tackle, say, like a mainstream title that just happens to be out, like BioShock Infinite or God of War, it's because of the very complicated nature of the game, that these are games that have a lot of good and a lot of bad in them, and that duality is fascinating. And breaking down how they could have been better, comparing them to other games that strive for similar goals. One of the best things about Matthewmatosis is his abilities of comparison, his ability to take two things that, that have similar intentions and break down how each one did or didn't accomplish what they were setting out to do, and not necessarily like a one-to-one comparison between these things, but just like how they each accomplished their goals when those goals were something similar. Another thing is that I think Matthewmatosis is exceptionally good at understanding the mind of the developer and what decisions they would have had to make while making a game. He can look at a mechanic and say, like, here's all the different ways that this could have been done. Here's why I think they chose this way. Here's another way that they could have done it, and what the benefits of doing it that way and the negatives of doing it that way would have been. And, ultimately say something like, well, I can't say if the game would have been better if they had done it this other way, but at least I understand why they did it the way they did. Or he can point out, when a mechanic fails to follow through on its potential, when there was something that if they had tweaked this a little bit, you would have been able to chain this combo instead of having two different ones. But just figuring out, peeling back the whole thought process behind the game, and even explaining like basic concepts of psychology and mechanics that underlie all of this. There's a great part in the Zelda, the latest Zelda video, what the hell is the game? Breath of the Wild, where he talks about the different types of problem solving that there are, of like the difference between, being able to come up with a solution yourself by sort of taking all the things that they've given you and just figuring out a way to do it when there's more than one answer, versus finding the answer that's already been put into the system, that's the only one that exists, and the way that the game handles each of those two different types of problem solving. Like, that's on a level that's a lot deeper than is this game good or not, you know? And it's not to say that Joseph Anderson doesn't go down those types of roads as well, but I think that while I appreciate that, you know, Joseph Anderson acknowledges that, you know, everything is subjective. It's not like he's making objective judgments. It does seem like his writing is a little bit more prescriptive, where, and granted, I haven't watched a ton of his content because, you know, I remember watching some of the Dark Souls 2 videos and just coming away, like, hard disagreeing with everything he was saying, because to me, to ignore the fact that just the movement mechanics alone in that game feels so ass compared to the other Dark Souls games, I mean, that's enough to be a huge indictment on the game, to me, that, like, you know, defending it beyond that point is, like, splitting hairs, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. Like, and I enjoyed his video on The Witness, but, like, some of the other ones I watched, it just felt like he was talking about some game at great length, and that the game is not interesting. It's not taking each mechanic and saying whether it's good or bad and why is not the same thing as looking at a mechanic and saying why it's interesting, why it's different, what makes it worth talking about, you know? So and what I meant with the prescriptive thing is that it feels more like he has an idea about how it should have been, and he'll say, like, well, this, you know, this should have been like this, as opposed to breaking down why it could have been that way, but why they decided to not do it that way, in a way that Matthewmatosis will more often do. Again, it's not even that there's, like, a gigantic difference between these two writers. It might even be that at the end of the day, I would watch Joseph Anderson if I thought his voice wasn't so monotonous and boring. You know, like, I think he's fine as a reviewer, and I watch a lot of video game reviewers, and not all of them do I consider to be necessarily amazing. His videos are just so goddamn long, and, you know, kind of droning. Like, I don't really find myself wanting to watch these, and I think that the reason that he's sort of become so popular, and why a lot of people will put him on the same level as Matthewmatosis, is that the general populace of gamers, of people who really care about every new release, are interested in hearing about just as many games as possible at as much depth as possible. You know, there's a lot of people who do want a 40-minute video about every new game, and they just basically want reviews that are deeper than the 15-minute reviews that are, you know, used as consumer reviews. Like, they don't want a should you buy video. They're going to buy the game anyways. They want somebody to put words to all the thoughts and feelings they have about the game. For me personally, I don't need that. I can do that myself. If I play a game, I will come to my own conclusions about it. I don't need somebody else. I don't need that validation of listening to somebody else analyze it. What I do get out of it is if somebody can notice things I didn't notice, which or play games I wouldn't play. So, like, I tend to watch more videos about games that I'm not interested in playing, but I love to listen to this guy talk, and I like to hear what he's going to say about a game so I can, like, vicariously experience it through them. For instance, someone like B-Mask is one of my favorite analytical YouTubers, who also makes super long videos sometimes that are just as good as, you know, a Matthewmatosis video, but in a very different way, where he'll approach it a lot more focused on aesthetics and theming and, like, really getting into the bones of how a game portrays its central idea. And you know, and he also just goes way more in depth about visuals than Matthewmatosis usually does, because he's a visually, you know, kind of focused guy. So, like, when I watch a B-Mask video, it's not because I played this game and I want to reaffirm my thoughts on it. I watch it because I want to hear B-Mask talk about whatever he's interested in, because I will be interested in his perspective. With Matthewmatosis, it's more like the very holistic view will teach me something about game design, something about the thought process behind it. Like, because he's only tackling games that are worth talking about, they always will teach you something about why games are interesting. Why do we play them? What do they what can they do and what do they stand to offer to you as a player. Which is why, it's so exciting that he focused on something like what do they call it, Jaxtronics? Was that the name of whatever the company was that made Space Chem and all those other games? When he did that series on that, and a lot of people weren't as excited about it because it's not a hype beast kind of franchise the way that like Mario or Zelda is. But I was Zachtronics, I think that's what they call it. I was excited by those videos because those games are the absolute pinnacle at what they are doing, which is puzzle games, which are a huge, like, it should be a huge part of gaming. It's something that video games can uniquely do well that no other medium really can. And, that these games explore those ideas in so much depth made that a really fascinating series to me. And, like, that's what I come to him for. It's not for, again, hearing about games that I already played and already formed an opinion on. It's about understanding why games work at all, why they are interesting as a medium. So yeah, I guess personally I feel like Matthewmatosis and Joseph Anderson are doing two very different things. I feel like Joseph Anderson is more about taking it, playing a game and then just reviewing it in a lot of depth so that you as a viewer can feel like somebody said the thing. Somebody said all the things that you were hoping that could be said about the game. Matthewmatosis is more like, why does this game exist and what can we learn from it? And that's kind of more what I tried to copy in, say, my GameCube Forever series. If you ever watch those videos, while they're not extremely long, partly because GameCube games themselves aren't extremely long, I tried to focus a lot more on the, like, why does this game exist? What were they trying to accomplish? What is interesting about it? As opposed to, like, would you like this game? Or is this game good? Because those questions aren't as interesting to me. Alright.